Oh, my name is Bruce Poon Tip, and I'm the founder of G Adventures. And I founded G Adventures in 1990, so I guess I've been in the industry now for 33 years.
Welcome to Voices of Travel, The Next Chapters, an interview series that captures the passion, humor, and character of 15 remarkable people as they tell us the stories of their careers in the industry. Thanks for joining me, Bruce. So, starting G Adventures was your first job in travel?
Actually, I did have a job for about 8 months before that, so maybe 89 I would have started in travel. I had a job prior to starting G Adventures. There was a company called Quest Nature Tours. I set up tours for them. I was just out of travel college, and it was kind of my first job. And I worked there for 8 months, setting up birding tours. Yeah, and that's when I got the idea. I guess it was a little like actually I was going to start G Adventures prior to that, but then I got offered this job, and I thought, oh well, this would give me good experience because instead of just starting right out of school, so I worked there for less than a year. Yeah.
So, then how did you go from that to launching a business?
Yeah, just like I guess every good entrepreneur, I had my Eureka moment. I actually traveled to Asia that year, and really refined the ideas of what I wanted to do because travel is very different in 1990s. You can imagine 1989, and I came back and I quit my job and researched my first itineraries, and I went up pounding the pavement for people to book on my first trips. Yeah, right here, all here in Toronto.
Was it hard to break in as a newcomer in those days?
Well, I think it might have been in any other business. I was just so driven by passion, and I originally was just going to run a few trips with a few people, and so I arranged with Mountain Equipment Co-op here to do some talks in their store, so people would come and learn about different destinations, and I would tell them about this new way of traveling, which is kind of like organized backpacking, is how I was pitching it, and got my first groups off, and then the rest was history.
What were the countries or destinations that you started with? I mean, obviously it's evolved significantly since then.
Yeah. We started. My first trips were in Ecuador, and my second departures were in Belize. So I also had trips for sale to Venezuela. Venezuela is a bit of a disaster now, but it was calmer then. But none of those trips ever sold. Venezuela never sold. So I had Ecuador and Belize were the first trips that we ran back then.
And these days, you're at how many countries?
Oh, we have trips in over 100 countries. Yeah, we have over 1,000 tours, and people from 160 countries book trips with us every year. So it's a very different world now.
Did you have a mentor growing up?
No, I didn't have a mentor as such. I mean, it's funny that there was a lot of people that I admired, and I was an avid reader. I always feel like some of these people that I really admired were mentors, but through their words, not directly. But Max Ward, for instance, was a great, I would say, mentor of mine. I met him a couple times. How he, Ward, I don't know if Ward Air, and his kind of, his really commitment to customer service. But he was a real influence on me. And I wouldn't say that he knew he was my mentor, but I met him a few times, and I was influenced by him a lot.
What's some advice that you got along the way that you still value today?
I think the advice that I got that always resonated with me is, love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, that was an early mantra, kind of a motto for me. And I always pursued, passion and happiness, and then it never felt like I had a job. And so I was always really committed and, willing to put in the extra mile, work, always have that fifth gear when it was needed. And that's what you really need as an entrepreneur to survive. And so that always worked for me.
Ever since I've been in the travel industry, I've always associated G Adventures with tourism for good, travel for good. When did that come to be important to you, and why is it so important?
Well, Travel for Good became really important for us really around the mid-90s, 1995. We did our first community projects in 1996. The ideas started coming with us working with Conservation International and different foundations in 1995. So we were already 5 years old by then. But when we first started back in 1990, we were doing something called, micro investments. That's really, micro businesses, because we were starting a lot of little businesses to run our programs locally, but there wasn't a saying for it back then. We were just investing in local people to help run our trips, and we were giving them advances, microloans, for them to be able to develop some of our programs. Like, that's very common now in the NGO world, to give microloans and start businesses for people. But we did that from the very first day, but we really got serious about it when the idea of ecotourism started to become a thing in 1995, 96. So that's when we started running our first partnerships with nonprofits, and then we formed our own in 2003, the Planetara Foundation.
Sustainable travel has been a key part of G Adventures operations for quite some time now. The last tourist addressed a lot of things that need to be changed. So do you think responsible or sustainable tourism is achievable? And what needs to be changed in order to make that happen?
I think what needs to change in travel right now is, it's very little. It's really just, spending money locally and making sure local people benefit. I mean, the problem that we have right now is, that there's companies that are promising infinite growth, and we have a finite amount of iconic destinations in the world. So it's not a sustainable model, because there's this push for bigger and bigger ships or resorts, and it's not sustainable when we have a certain amount of places where people can go. So it's achievable now, but long term it isn't. But really, the big opportunity we have in the travel industry is to really lean into being a transformational industry, because we're booking holidays in some of the poorest countries in the world and the most in need citizens in the world, and buying luxury holidays. If local people were just part of the supply chain and were involved in the dialogue and conversations of tourism and brought into the value chain, travel could be this transformational industry that changes lives and really impacts some of the most in need on the planet. So I don't think it needs really a lot. It just needs, first of all, the consumer to change, because the consumer has to demand the product. But it also needs businesses to put, local spending and local jobs and local people at the center of their business model. And I don't think it's a big deal, but it's hard when there's a competition to drive prices down. And when you start driving prices down and start selling capacity over experience, it puts pressure on local people.
Can you talk to me a bit about how the travel industry has changed over the years, particularly with technology, and how that's impacted your business?
Yeah, travel has changed a lot. I mean, I don't think there's any industry in the world that is impacted by technology or the internet more than travel. I think save publishing. I think publishing is maybe the only other industry that has been revolutionized by technology. For us, however, it has been a great thing for us. I mean, the internet. I mean, I started G Adventures with the telex. They didn't have fax machines, really. They weren't common anyways when I first started. But when technology, even communication, became so fast with the internet, with email, and that alone gave us a global market to suddenly be able to sell outside of Canada. And that was really when we started exporting tourism, which was really a foreign idea when it came to the idea of tours, when we first started doing it, but technology did that. Now, 20 years later, social and the commitment to social, where that has changed, that has created a whole new engagement level with our customers and allowed us to create content that's very rich in creating an intimate relationship with customers. So the idea of social and technology has always been, has always been a fantastic thing for us. And now the world is changing in terms of their values and matching their values with their holiday time. So it fits right in there with us. And we seem like geniuses starting way back in 1990, but business and society are always run parallel, and we've changed as business has changed and society has changed. So we've always benefited from technology. So I mean, we at G Adventures, we really live a change or die mentality. So we embrace change and we embrace technology. Like AI is coming up, right? And now we're feverishly building policies around AI and see how it's going to impact our business, but we're not afraid of it.
Looking back on your career, tell me about some of the highlights.
Oh gosh, I've had so many highlights. The highlights would have to be the work that we do with Planetera, the foundation work. I mean, we have over 100 community projects around the world where we can create, where there's extreme poverty and tourism intersect, we can do amazing things at G Adventures. Like we can, create poverty alleviation and wealth distribution. And people can, change lives by just going on holidays. And that's really, magical for us. And so I'm really proud of, how that's grown, where we've come doing that. But I mean, there's been tons of individual accolades. I've been very, very lucky. And I don't know if there's, and I think the right answer though is my family. It's the proudest moment after I said all that.
How many countries have you been to? I mean, is travel still important to you after being to so many places?
Travel is still important to me now, I have to tell you. I missed it when I got grounded for COVID. Going into COVID, I would have answered this question very differently. I would have said that I was sick of travel. I never want to travel again. I complained about airports and people in airports and always being on planes because I was traveling about 300,000 miles a year for the last decade. I was never on the ground more than 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So the idea that I suddenly stopped traveling for 2 years, I missed it. And now I think I do travel differently. Has to be more meaningful to me, and that's the best place to be. Where if I'm going to travel, it has to be. I'm not just going to jump on the plane for a meeting anymore. I think that's changed. But it's rekindled like a love of travel for me for sure, which I didn't think was possible. I got to say, as I was steaming towards retirement, I was thinking, the last thing I want to do in retirement is travel. I mean, I just want to go somewhere and just be still. But I think being forced into hibernation over COVID has given me a new passion and appreciation for travel. And I said to myself, and I've said this numerous times, that I'm never going to complain about travel again. And even though I've been on a few trips, even just this last week, I had a crazy trip to Qatar and Europe. And there was all kinds of things that went wrong, but I've got such a better attitude about it. It was just, it was smooth sailing because I'm just happy to be traveling again.
Did you find traveling that much was easy, or was it challenging? How did you manage your work-life balance, being there for important family events?
Work-life balance have always been really, important for me. I'm very lucky. I mean, I've had this 33-year career at G Adventures, and certainly the first 10 years were outrageous in terms of just starting an international, multinational company. There was no way around, and there was no work-life balance or the thought of work-life balance. And I've never really thought of work and life. It's just one big mess. But with success comes a lot of freedom, and I've always been, I never travel weekends. I'm always home every weekend, and I'll go the craziest places Monday to Friday. But as long as I'm home Friday, everything's good. And so I'm lucky that I do have the freedom, and the success gives you the freedom to have a little bit more control of your schedule. But it's not something that I've ever really been concerned about, I have to say. Work-life balance to me, because I love working so much. And many people think I'm sick, but when I'm on vacation, I miss working. I love what I do, and I just don't really think of the two things as balancing. They're just all integrated into one hot mess of a life, I guess.
So what advice would you give to someone who's starting out in the travel industry? Or what would you tell yourself now that you've learned along the way?
I tell people that, you get into the travel industry for passion, purpose, and happiness. That's really why you want to get into the industry. I don't think anyone in the travel industry gets into the industry to get rich. You are committed to traveling, and you're so passionate about it, you want to help others travel. That passion will carry you, and all the other things will fall into place. You'll find success, you'll get promotions, you'll find a career. But it starts with that carnal kind of urge to explore and to travel and to be passionate enough about it to make it your career. Because I think that people often are in fear of that, or you're kind of taught that work has to be separate from your personal life, and it's hard and you have to dislike it. But I think many of us in travel know that it's a beautiful industry, and you can be really passionate about it. And I give that advice to young people coming into this, in the industry. Find that passion and purpose first, and everything else will take care of itself.
Now, Bruce, I've asked you a lot of questions, but I'm still wondering whether there's anything more that you want to share with me.
Yes, I do. So, one thing I'd like to mention is, one question I get asked a lot is, what can we do to travel better? And I always say that because we're in such a privileged position to sell travel, and agents have the customers in front of them. I so rarely see a customer. I don't get to have access to them like sellers of travel do. And I always say to people that, the first thing that people have to understand is that travel is a privilege. It's not a right. And that small change in your attitude towards travel will transform the world. The idea that there's so few people on this planet, when you look at the population of the planet, there's so few people that get to say, I want to go on holiday and have the disposable income at the time, or to go on a vacation. So with that privilege comes great responsibility. And if you understand that travel is a privilege and not your right, and you travel with that mindset that you don't have a right to thread counts on sheets and 10 different restaurants, and the fact that you're going to get sushi in a foreign country and French food and Italian food and other, or Broadway shows or indoorsy planning, all these things are distractions. The destination is what's important, and it's your privilege to travel. And if you just made that simple that change, travel would lean into being the transformational industry that it should be.
Thanks for telling us your story, Bruce.
And thanks to all of you for joining me for this episode. I'm Bob Mowat, Executive Editor of Canadian Travel Press, and I hope you'll join me for another remarkable conversation on Voices of Travel, the next chapters.